I'm going to try to explain, and there was probably 3 or 4 of us in our office the other week trying to understand DNA and mutations and what actually happens of how you get resistance. So I'll try to see if I can explain it. Basically, when you have an enzyme in the rodent's blood, which just keeps circulating around in the system. And what you have is, when you get a rodenticide, if you see this sort of diagram here, you have a nice fit here, and this is simplified for the presentation. What happens when you have a rodenticide is the rodenticide basically comes in and sticks onto the enzyme, which then stops the enzyme clotting, which obviously then lets that's what actually kills the rodent. What happens is when you have a mutation, and also what happens here is when the rodenticide sticks in, this is like a balloon. So you push one area and another area gets distorted. So that stops these 2 bits coming together. So with a rodenticide, the rodenticide gets put in here. The 2 connections of the enzyme cannot make, so you get the clotting process does not happen. When you get mutation, shall we say we came up with the analogy in the office of, if you have a glove, the rodenticide fits perfectly into the enzyme. Okay, so you get all 5 fingers in. If that enzyme changes, mutates in this stage, you can't get your full hand in. The difference is, and that's where you get resistance, and a lot of the common rodenticides that are being used today don't work because they can't bind to the enzyme to stop the clotting process. With Rodilon, it's much more flexible. What happens is you don't need all 5 fingers placed into that glove to actually get the rodenticide to work. If you only can get 1 in, it still binds to that enzyme to actually stops the clotting process, and that's why there is no known resistance for diphenthioate across the planet, and this has been working for 20 years. So it's not a new thing that we expect resistance to come. We don't, because it's successful for at least 20 years so far to date, and we still don't have any cases of resistance.
About this Oak Processionary moth. Has anyone ever heard of the Oak Processionary moth at all? That's good, that's good. You will if you haven't, I guarantee you will. This is an insect pest. It was found about 5 years ago in Richmond. And like a lot of these insect pests, it was actually brought in on imported trees. And these, I believe, came from Italy, the fastigiate oaks. And we were called out because the oaks were starting to defoliate. And unfortunately, this is actually a sewage work, so they were trying to screen it off. And it's literally just next to Kew Gardens, and I'll come on to the Kew story in a minute. But when we went out, we actually noticed that it had this, basically this insect pest, which we refer to as, say, this Oak Processionary moth. It's quite distinctive. You get these little black heads, and really the main issue here is you identify it by obviously these lots and lots of grey hairs. The reason why they call it an Oak Processionary moth is very interesting, is it actually moves from tree to tree in literally, the insects are like 2 by 2 and they go along literally in processionary, just as like a troop of soldiers. And what's quite interesting, if you actually creep up to the back of the line and you take the back 2 caterpillars away, they kind of go round in circles for a while, and then they carry on, and then you take out another 2 and they go round in circles and so forth. So, okay, it's a caterpillar, and like all caterpillars, it's a defoliating pest. And it's spread since 5 years ago. It spreads about, well, they think it spreads on average about 0.7 kilometres a year.
This is infrared technology. Stuff you see on police camera action, you know, when you've got the camera up above and you see your criminal running around. This actually was in a food environment. Couldn't work out where the mouse problem was coming from. This is a wee cabinet, and it was actually a fixed unit because there was a motor inside that drove off to a different area. Guess where the mice were? Didn't need anything else. I didn't need bait stations. I didn't need tracking dust. I didn't need to go with anything else, because we walked in and said, I reckon there's a reasonable place where your mice are. So we took the unit apart, and hey presto, guess what? We found the problem. and solve their problem. Not just put bait stations in that you then have to follow up on, that you then actually have to do your treatment reports on. You know, this was very accurate in what we did. And it also worked through that we were paid. The day rate that we got for going in and solving this was the annual price that the pest controller was being paid. Technology, brilliant.
What piece of equipment did you use?
It's an infrared camera.
How much did that cost?
Quite a lot. But that doesn't matter. But it doesn't. Write it off over 5 years. Taxman picks up the bill off all of it. Because the difference is, in the customer's expectations, am here. I don't mean I'm in the company that we were actually working with. And that's the difference. That's the value add, is that actually that cost of equipment, that will be paid back within a year. Brilliant. So I then get 4 years of free, effectively free work with that kit. The other side is what that can also do, and there are dogs now that are starting to come through, and again, sort of bed bugs comes into that play, but someone's actually developed a dog that will now detect mice. Very clever. You can't take it outside the UK. Kind of a European market, that nullifies that. This is a piece of kit that you put into a box and off it goes. So that's just sort of one side of where we come from. There's other products that have come onto the market. Who's heard of SP Tab? If not, go and see Chris afterwards. Fantastic product. Basically, it uses pheromones for disrupting moth, particularly in the food industry, but also with clothes moth is coming through. That's brilliant technology, because it's not the traditional, I'm going to bash it or I'm going to spray it. Again, it's about how you change your perception, it's about how you change your customer's perception of you. I'm not going to take away Dave's thunder later on. You hear about this, but there's now a cockroach pop-up trap. So there's no more ripping off of that cop cover, there's no more putting the tablet on, because that all takes time. Time, as we know, is 90% of your job. Brilliant. So if you can save time, you become more cost-effective to your customer. And as Alan was saying just a second ago, you know, quantum, as Rob was, you know, as you sort of justified with that, a multi-pest product, you've only got to buy one product. That's brilliant technology. Kind of goes away from the 5 litres that you've got to pump up and down, it spills all over the floor, it does. You know, it's that perception to your customer that you are dealing with something that's really clever. We're not catching rats anymore. We're really clever. And as a result of that, I think that's where price comes in.